non-co-opted, NASA-funded guys. We've been talking about Planet X and gravitational waves and torsion waves and all this stuff for decades and decades. And in the end, what always happens? We end up being proved right, and all those that doubted us and said we were crazy, they tell us we're the crazy ones, we end up being right and they end up being wrong. And I think it's really important for us to take credit for our victories and recognize that we're ahead of the curve.
Jewish mystics and their interactions with celestial beings, people normally call angels, but we call the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were interacting with the Essenes near Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. They were teaching them to open stargates. They were teaching them human transformation into angelic beings or Anunnaki. And I will be showing you in the Dead Sea Scrolls the fact of that interaction. It's something that Mr. Sitchin, I think, would enjoy seeing, but as a Jew at the time, he was very touchy about anything that contradicted Judaism. In fact, severely limited him in his understanding of the really big picture about the Anunnaki. And I tip my hat to Mr. Sitchin. I have long admired him, considered him a friend, and will always defend his work. But I think we can advance that work now, and it's up to us to do that. So thank you all for being here this morning. I look forward to seeing you all this weekend.
But I think that there is something very physical about the recycling of souls in and out of specific containers, and that the whole issue of bloodline, cells, and DNA are where the big action is. And here we are, a population that is on the petri dish. We haven't got a clue of what is looking down onto this. And so in a very interesting way, the 1980s discussion and what you just said sort of come together.
Great.
Thank you for talking. How come they helped us or built all these things, like so much stuff before, but then not now?
I think they are helping us now.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I mean, one of the ways to track that is look at the technology development.
Right.
It's all about amplifying our intelligence and connecting with what they were able to do back then. So I think Silicon Valley is actually an offshoot of
Right.
extraterrestrial invention.
Like things more just like
we don't,
weapons and
not
technology.
Weapons. Yeah, technology.
But not like building massive structures.
Yeah, maybe we don't need those structures now, because we go through periods of light and darkness where different parts of the solar system, our sun and moon have shifted recently, so maybe we don't need that technology today. Maybe we need a different type of technology or template.
When they were up there, and you were up there too, and you guys had 3 words.
Yeah.
Why is animal mutilation so important? I know that wasn't your answer.
Right. Linda Moulton Howe has extensively studied the precision of these animal mutilations.
Yeah.
They're very strange, and these animals, some of them drop from the sky, and so she believes that that's a path to uncovering who they are and why they're here.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I thought it was so interesting, the idea of the male seed. That was not something that was known until 1900, that a woman serves a purpose in the
female
human
is the
creation.
incubator.
Yeah.
So we went from being idols to incubators, and with all due respect, that's my friend Julia Stonehouse from the UK, who wrote Idols to Incubators. That's her life's work, and I'm a follower of her. And she rewrote her book and calls it Father's Seed, Mother's Sorrow. It's a little inexpensive ebook. And that is the scientific misconception that has corralled women into a suppressed society, of the males just needing to control where they plant their seed.
That's really crazy.
Until 1900. The first photographic proof did not happen until 1960 with the publication of a book called Ovum Humanum by Dr. Landrum Shettles that actually showed the sperm and the ova uniting with the 23 chromosomes from the male and the 23 chromosomes from the female. But there's actually a little extra mitochondrial DNA that the female passes. That was the whole story of Gilgamesh, because Gilgamesh, he said that he was 2/3 royal. So there's an extra punch from the mitochondrial DNA, and that's why when women rise to equality with males, the paradigm of this planet will at last shift, and that's up to each one of us. By declaring war, but and forming partnerships with males that support us, and teaching them and educating them from the womb. If you're carrying a male child, it's your responsibility to download that paradigm into that new world.
I'm just curious what you said about vaccinations and them being bad.
Horrible.
Just because it's a pollutant.
It's totally unnatural.
It's unnatural.
We're born with a magnificent immune system that needs to be honored and supported.
Okay.
And the whole germ theory is pretty much a false theory. The underlying principle to the germ theory is the terrain. In other words, if the terrain, the ground, the soil is healthy, then the bacteria are irrelevant.
But at this point where our food is fake and fruit isn't real and all this stuff, does that change the need for...
Not vaccination.
Okay.
Will only make it worse and alter our DNA forever.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, the main thrust of my work, if you will, is with the microcirculatory system. And NASA and the company that I'm so excited about called Beamer have entered and signed, sealed, and delivered an R&D agreement to put I can't say too much, I'll be careful with my words, to put the Beamer technology into a special fabric for the astronauts to wear under their spacesuits, so that this amazing multidimensional wave signal that constitutes the Beamer system can be in space, in deep space. It's all about it's all about circulation. Being careful because we're in front of the FDA right now for full FDA approval, and the Beamer is a device to definitely take a look at, and I'm the person to come to help
That's
you.
super cool, thank you. I just started drinking cinnamon because that's good for your circulation.
Give me your cards.
Exactly.
Yeah, oh, and may I just ask you one last thing? I'm
Sure.
so sorry. It's just you were saying like a lot about light and about coming from light and going back
chromosomes.
to... Yeah, oh yeah, our chromosomes
chromosomes
are
are
light.
made of light.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Not very well, because it takes a physicist to actually, or a molecular biologist, but I have seen the actual photographs of the chromosomes, and they just light up like a house of fire. They're just beautiful. And that's the work of William Brown, who was with Nassim Haramein at the Resonance Project when it was still up and running. So I think we all stand on the shoulders of someone else who has shared their love and their wisdom, and that's the feminine way.
Yeah.
The patriarchal way is the ego. I want it all for myself. I want to be the big man. And the feminine way, why we have not been accredited for so much that we've discovered and done, having been the women behind the great men, is because our egos don't need that. But I stand on the shoulders of those that have shared wonderful information with me. Julia Stonehouse, Rianne Eisler, William Brown, Zechariah Sitchin.
He's so
These
cool.
are-
I like watching his old videos.
The only
He's
thing that's
amazing.
conspicuous by its, yes, they're brilliant. The only thing conspicuous by its absence is the suppression of the goddess.
Yeah.
And that's been the decimation of the goddess sites, the goddess culture, and that's just from a fear paradigm. And that's, you know, that's about as far as I think I should go.
No. Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you.
Welcome to the UFO panel at Conscious Life Expo. It's a wonderful panel. It always is. I just love my panel every year. And thank you for spending time with us today. We love being here, and we love that you've come to see us, because there's so many things you could be doing in LA. And we love that you come to the Expo and learn about what we feel is reality. I know a lot of people would think that's kind of crazy, but actually this is reality. This is the real news right here, the news you won't hear anywhere else. And we're going to hear about the latest reports of UFOs and the extraterrestrial technology, and incredible stories and accounts from people today. And people often ask me, why is it important, UFOs and disclosure? Because there's so many serious things going on in the world, and they want to know, well, why are you so into UFOs? Why aren't you helping this or helping that? Well, I always say this is the answer to many of the world's problems. One of the things is within UFO technology, obviously it's free energy. It's advanced free energy that we need and is being kept secret because there's been UFO crashes, there's been back engineering, so there's no more fossil fuels needed. So that's one very important thing about disclosure. Another thing that I feel is really important is that UFOs have the best defense. And you know what that is? That is that UFOs can stop weapons being fired. They have shut down a nuclear missile centers. They have stopped they have prevented themselves from being shot at by weapons. And also when people encounter a UFO, very often their car stops running. And so they can actually shut down technology that's dangerous. And it's for peaceful means. They don't cause us harm, but for peaceful means. They show us that we don't need these weapons. And if we had that technology, of course, then there'd be peace in the world. So I really think that's very important too. So this kind of technology is being kept secret. So that's a couple of reasons why I feel they're important. Another thing is consciousness. We can't really understand these things until we develop consciously ourselves, because many of the extraterrestrials, as you know, who are visiting us, their consciousness is much higher than ours. And we're like the bad aliens. People say, well, who are the bad aliens? I don't want to meet one of them. But we are the bad aliens usually, shooting at UFOs and causing problems to the planet and everything, destroying the planet. So that's some of the reasons that it's important to me. This panel is called High Strangeness today because we all love a mystery. I love reading about true mysteries, which is about so much in the UFO field, that there's so much strange things happening. High strangeness, which is a word which was coined by Moulton Howe to describe these things, these paranormal things. And so I think that's very important to talk about. And some of the things that you will hear might be scary, but then other things are very inspiring and positive. And the reason is there's all kinds of ETs visiting us. There's very advanced, they're ones that are very advanced spiritually and here to encourage us and inspire us, as well as the ones with their own agendas. There's many, many. So it's not like it's one or the other. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful panel. And I'll start.
He remembers the summer of '65 was the first time that my grandpa got that call, and he took him to the airport, and he went on TDY, temporary duty assignment, to none other than Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. If you know anything about Wright-Patterson, we do know, documented without debate, that the debris, a lot of the debris from Roswell went to Wright-Patterson. It was and still is the head of the Foreign Technology Division. It was the home of Project Blue Book, blah, 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 blah. Well, at certain times, my grandfather was called to go working there. At one time, my grandmother was very sick, and my dad couldn't get a hold of him to tell him that his mom is in the hospital. And it really upset my dad because we almost lost her. She almost died, and when Grandpa came back, my dad had it out with him. I had to get a hold of you. You weren't there. I called the phone number. They asked me what building you were working in. I don't know. You only said building 18, which is one of the buildings in the legend of Wright-Patterson. And he said, I told you there's not always a phone where I'm working. He said, what do you mean there's not a phone where you're working? There's phones everywhere. He said, not everywhere I'm working is above ground. Little by little, before my grandfather passed away of cancer, through watching like Unsolved Mysteries and having Grandpa there, is this true? Is this did you see this at the base? And he would just kind of nod his head, that's interesting. Or he'd say, that's completely crazy. Well, at one point, I almost made it to the hospital before he passed away, but it was him and my father, literally on his deathbed. My grandfather, after years of battling cancer. And he turned to my father and he said, son, I know what you've been asking me. Don't worry. He said, we're not alone. you don't need to be afraid. He passed away. He kept his oath. We've kind of been on this treasure hunt looking to see if Grandpa left little documents or things like that. We have been able to, it's purely speculative, but match up some major UFO events like Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, and things like that at times when Grandpa was gone working.
Hopefully it'll get more and more exposure as time goes on, and more people from different levels of society that know can maybe come forward and help us understand what is going on, because there's answers out there, and I think the people need to understand that there's a safe place to go where we won't talk about it if you don't want to talk about it.
I still can remember the very first rancher in Colorado that I interviewed back in '79, who said that he had seen a pale yellowish white beam coming down out of something in the sky down into a pasture, and I was talking to him because he'd had a series of mutilations. And over the years now, since '79 to now, there have probably been not more than 6, but they're significant, and that is talking with people who raise animals for a living, and they have seen these beams. And in one case, the rancher saw the animal come up into the beam, and in another case in Oregon, saw the animal coming down in a beam, and why in some cases it can be 200 or 300 feet. The beam literally stops as if it were a solid pipe. We're used to thinking of light like in the room, that it trails off, but it does not stop like a pipe. In this case, the rancher said that he could see the animal was down, and then it was like the light stopped, and then the animal was dropped to the ground 200 or 300 feet. These are all variations that when it comes to the forensic investigations that I have done with veterinarians and with other type of scientists, you will find animals, mutilated animals, that when they take the hide off at a necropsy, the bones are broken. The hips are broken, the legs are broken. You wouldn't know that if you didn't do a necropsy. And there have been many veterinarians have said, whatever happened here, this animal had to have been dropped to break all these bones. So that one eyewitness of the light coming down a tube and then the animal dropping to the ground mutilated, that would explain the broken bones. But we're talking about some sort of a technology that can go all the way to the ground, and it can also lift up a 2,000-pound animal. So that what I call the tube technology, which has been seen in the human abduction syndrome as well, that is the hypothesis is that if you have a string of people out on a path and one disappears, whether people see the person disappear or not, that we are dealing with technology that is extraterrestrial, defined as extraterrestrial in various government documents, that has the ability to be holographic, which is the projection of a three-dimensional object that our mind's eyes, retina cannot tell from the world around us. One of you could be one of the ET holograms, and then if you disappeared, we would not be aware. It would be a projection that was there to upload, download information. The second is neutralizing gravity, being able to use this beam technology to lift, as far as I know, any weight up and put it back down. And the third, this invisibility, hologram, and neutralizing gravity are the three categories in terms of what people who have worked in government projects on extraterrestrial technology, those are the three categories they are always talking about. So one of the eeriest cases that sort of like it bridges to what you're trying to figure out, how do these people disappear? In the last 36 years of investigating animal mutilations all over this planet, this one still haunts me. It was Cripple Creek, Colorado, south of Denver, very rural. And it was a family, husband, wife, 3 kids, and I think there were 2 large German Shepherd dogs that always slept in the master bedroom with where the husband and wife, and the sort of like a cabin house. They had a window that looked out on the corral the corral by measurement was 30 feet from this window to the corral fence. And you came out of the bedroom and you went into the kitchen, and there was a door that had a long window. So you could see out into the corral, the bedroom window and the kitchen window. And the owner told me he had a routine with a brand new, by that time when this occurred, it was a stallion, high quality blood. And he was in the routine of taking food out to the stallion, that 30 feet down the kitchen steps out to the corral, feeding the stallion at 7 p.m. and then 7 a.m. in the morning. He had a regular routine. He loved this new horse. And he said everything was normal. I fed that horse at 7 p.m. There was nothing out of place in the corral. Through the night, there appears to have been a very light snowfall, like maybe a quarter of an inch, if you can imagine, where it was just very, very light. That light snowfall would have shown rabbit tracks or tracks, which is important to keep in mind, because when the family gets up at 7 a.m., there'd been no disturbance of the dogs. Nobody was aware of anything in the night. And they go out into the kitchen, and he said he looked out through that kitchen door and he could see his stallion. It was lying on its right side, and he ran, got into the corral, and said to me, he said, "Linda, my God, this horse, there is not any track around this body. There is no hoof track of the horse," which was the snowfall, the light snowfall at night was important for this. So it means that he's looking at the horse that he fed at 7 a.m. lying on its side with no tracks of anything else around it. And he said so it's lying like this. The left eye was, the way he described it, think of a blue metallic solid marble. So there was no sclera, no iris. It had turned a blue-white, like a solid, he said it looked metallic, the eye of the horse that had been normal 12 hours earlier. And then in the rear, and he called the police, and I talked with the police chief who came out, and so I got the stereo observations of this. And they both said that at the back of the horse, the diameter of the excision they measured, the police guy measured it, was about 12 inches, but it went in like a cone, that there was literally like a solid form, like a cone going into the horse. And the police chief told me, when I got there and I'm looking at this, he said, I just reached down with my fingers and I did this to the surface where it had been excised. And he said, Linda, it felt like sandpaper. He's talking about where the excision of the rectal area of the horse has been removed, but that the tissue felt like sandpaper. And they did not do, which is sad, they did not pay for for cooked hemoglobin, for looking at heat on that horse. But my guess is, based on hundreds of cases that I have dealt with, that this would have also been, if they had done the pathology work on the tissue, they would have found the hemoglobin had been cooked, the collagen had been cooked. But here's the kicker on this. Everybody thinks laser. In all of the animal mutilation cases, whether it was a cat, a dog, a horse, a cow, and this has affected goats and sheep and deer and elk and all kinds of animals all around the world, when you put the mutilator's cut, let's say on the right side of a stereoscope, microscope, and then you take something that's like known normal gynecology, laser surgery or something, and put it here, and you just look, what is the difference between the laser excision and the mysterious mutilation? that a pathologist asked me to do that and compare. And the first thing that I noticed is that in the mutilator's cut, there was no what the pathologist referred to as the black pepper grains that would be the carbon residue. We're a carbon-based life form. So if you take a laser with a certain heat and any excision on tissue, you're always going to be able to see under a microscope the carbon residue of a carbon life form exposed to a laser. In the mutilations of animals, we never find the carbon residue. So what is the cutting instrument? If it is sound, it is not something that was being used in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. As we come up further, we don't know what military are capable of, but the mutilations extend back to the beginning of the 20th century. So you have to be able to come up with hard physical data that match throughout the whole timeline. And when you have the same kinds of excisions and patterns on animals around the world in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there is no technology that could do what I'm telling you, cook the hemoglobin, cook the collagen, and leave no carbon residue. That was one of the most important stress pieces of evidence that hematologist, pathologist John Altshuler stressed with me during our investigation of animals. So it means if it is something like sound, it was 4 years ago, I got an email from a man who is working, let's just say he's doing medical work for one of the military agencies, and he is working with sonic surgery. And he called to talk to me about his experience with the sonic surgery and was hoping that he might be able to examine some mutilation tissue versus what he's doing in sonic surgery so we would have something fresh. And one of the problems, and I'll close this out, is that I will often now, for the first time in my life, I am getting calls from sheriffs directly around. They understand that they're dealing with, it's not disease, it's not predator, it's not satanic cult. And I had a sheriff call me from Kansas 3 or 4 months ago, and he said, we need help. We're dealing with something here that is so strange, and I understand you've done a lot of investigations. And when you say to the sheriff, have you agreed to pay for a full necropsy? 99.5% of the time, the sheriff's offices will say, no, we don't have the money for that. And then I have volunteered several times, well, look, I'll put up the $400. I would really like to see what the story is on this animal. And then they'll say, we went to a veterinarian and said that this investigative reporter is willing to pay for the necropsy and wants to know the results, and then the veterinarian will back out because they do not want anything that they're doing on a mutilated animal to reach the public. That's another variation on the problem. And probably the biggest is that even if sheriffs are now calling me about a new mutilation, they haven't gotten a call from the rancher often before 36 hours or more. And here now is the problem that I dealt with over all of the work I did with Dr. Altshuler. If you don't get to an animal within, at least the vets say, within 36 hours, no later, to excise tissue fluid, you're not going to have what would be considered a medically acceptable laboratory panel on that tissue. You're always fighting time. And so when the vast majority of people out there who have mutilations and they wait for a day or two because they do not know if they want to have this discussion with a sheriff or with a vet, that I have an animal that has an ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals, and rectum cord out, and I don't know whether I want to bring satanic cult retaliation. Some people will hesitate for that reason. So we have a delay in time in getting hard evidence. And yet, right now, you could do this research yourself. If you can get an English translator, you could talk with veterinarian offices in Senasa in Argentina. And since 2002, the last report from Senasa, which is their form of the Department of Agriculture, was that they had had approximately 3,200 reported cases of animal mutilations in 7 provinces around Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Can a president just announce it, or how much permission do they have to have from who before they can do that?
Okay, I'll give you my opinion. This is my opinion. I wrote an article on my website called "The Reasons the Government has Decided Not to Tell You the Truth," and I go through 65 reasons. And I say that if I were to give you the briefing, you'd do exactly what they're doing. It's been 13 presidents who have dealt with this situation over the years. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, they've all done the same thing, which means they believe they're doing the right thing, or they want to kick the can down the road like the economy. But if you get behind the scenes and you see all this sort of stuff, like Stephen Greer talks about, and it's true. I mean, you suddenly get free energy or whatever, and suddenly the next morning people are selling oil shares at 5 cents on the dollar, and you're shorting everything, and the stock market starts to go down. You say to the president, "This may not happen, Mr. President, but it may happen," and you give them enough of those type of things. Politicians are gutless wonders. They are there to get reelected, and they're not going to do anything that they're absolutely certain. What I was told, I can tell you from a source that I would stake my life on, who I believe has some direct contact to Barack Obama, what he was told, and a high-level guy that he was connected to, I talked to, said that they want it out, but they don't want the government's fingerprints on it. And I said, well, how the hell do you do that? But there is moves, and that's where this stuff comes from, with Barack Obama and all these different people, and the CIA putting stuff on the site. I believe that they're releasing the story, the Area 51 leak, the live alien leak, all these kinds of things. They're leaking the story and protecting the classified information, because if you are a military person in the government, your worldview is, we're the good guys, and there's a bunch of bad guys out there, and we are the same as atomic weapons, or the latest planes we have, or whatever it is. We are not giving this technology to Al-Qaeda and all the bad guys in the world, and they're all bad guys. And that's the main reason to me. Barack has said it. He's in one of his interviews, he said, I can't reveal it. And that was, I think Ben did it, where he was breathing 42 times a minute, he's hyperventilating when he makes this statement, I can't reveal anything. That's basically what it's about, is it's classified. And if somebody in there believed that the truth had to come out, or that they were doing something illegal, someone would defect. Nobody has defected, and that means that they believe they're doing the right thing. And I'll give you one final example. Just in the last couple of days, somebody has done, I was at the Ford Library. If you remember, Ford was very adamant. He was, not only did he want disclosure, he said we should take the military officials and we should put them under oath and force them to tell us what's going on. That was when he was a congressman, and there's 1,700 pages at the Ford Library on that material. It was indexed by a guy in Michigan, so I looked at all this kind of stuff, and of course the immediate thing was, there's nothing as president. So I said to him, what is there as president? And he said, well, I really don't know. So I contacted the Ford Library last week, and I said, how much of your stuff have you inventoried, and how much UFO material have you got once he became president? There's not a single page. There's 1,700 pages before he became president, and I know a personal friend of mine that talked to Ford, and Ford confirmed that he had gotten a UFO briefing, and that he had seen the Holloman Air Force Base film. That's part of the presidential briefing, where the alien lands at Holloman Air Force Base. He had seen it, and then that guy said to him, he said, when was the briefing? And Ford says, I'm not going to tell you when the briefing is, don't even go there. So that's my opinion. The presidents, once you get that briefing, they all shut up. Jimmy Carter wanted UFOs out, he shut up as soon as he got in there. Everybody is shut up, everybody plays the game because they believe they're doing the right thing, and it's based on this fear that the technology will get out. So they're releasing the story of what's going on, but they're protecting what they think is a classified information. That
Grant has also made this point, and we've talked about it. We elect presidents, they go through an inauguration, and then the next thing is they are sitting down with people in the NSA, DIA, CIA to sign secrecy oaths as President of the United States, then they are given the briefing on UFOs and ETs. They already have their signature and the date as the new President of the United States, and there isn't anybody who is rational, who is going to be President, who is going to violate that oath over UFOs and ETs, but it does mean that Bill Clinton has been given a briefing. It does mean that George Bush, both of them, were given briefings. It does mean that Barack Obama has had a briefing on UFOs and ETs. So when they are throwing out these droplets on Kimmel,
well, you know, my opinion on disclosure is probably different than a lot of people in the UFO community. I know that a lot of them are being fed information from various government sources that all this stuff's going to come out, but I don't see that there's ever going to be some sort of official, you know, announcement with the president sitting in the Oval Office with his family pictures and the paned windows behind him saying, aliens are here, we've lied to you for 50 years, and they've been abducting people and conducting experiments on them and blah, blah, blah. I don't see that ever happening because the main reason is that, you know, he's at the top of the political food chain, or at least what we visually can see is the political food chain. If you do something like that, you're introducing a very destabilizing event into the political mindset. And when you do that and you're at the top of the food chain politically, the only place you have to go is down. So I can't imagine why any president, for instance, would ever accede to an announcement like that, or even allow the DOD or the DOJ or anybody like that to come out and issue these documents and say, yeah, we've lied to you all these years, plus there would be liability involved. So I just don't see it ever happening. And I think disclosure is kind of a unicorn. I think that they're just chasing unicorns. I hate to say that, but that's what I believe about the disclosure movement. I think it's kind of a waste of time and energy. And that sounds I don't mean that to be as harsh as it sounds.
But your peers, some of your peers have also campaigned for disclosure.
Yeah, I know, and they have, and I think that they could put their energy somewhere else that might be more productive. Now, what we do get is we do get information. We get pictures from NASA. We get a lot of things that come out that do sort of reveal it, that there is something going on, to the point that millions of people understand that there's something going on. And I think that's all we'll ever have. I think it'll be kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Everybody knows there's aliens, but we're not really ever officially going to acknowledge that there's aliens. As an example, politically, you know, it's pretty well known in a lot of circles right now that Hillary Clinton has some health issues, and she appears to have a thyroid problem, and that it's come through. But they don't talk about it on the news, so it'll be the same kind of thing with aliens. It's like we all know there's aliens, but nobody will ever really talk about it, and at least anybody in a position of authority. So that's the way I see things unwinding. And frankly, if the president ever does make an announcement like that, I'm heading for the hills, because that means that everything is coming apart, and because there's no other reason why he would reveal it. That's my take on it, anyway.
Wow, that's
different. It's different than
every night listening to this program. I broadcast to one person, and I have that relationship with that individual. Agnes, are you actually telling me that a family of Bigfoot threw rocks against the side of your house at 2 o'clock in the morning? No, I fell in love with radio when I was just a kid because it captured my imagination. And that's what we've been able to do with Coast to Coast AM. You will not believe the call that I took a couple weeks ago from a police officer. He said, George, I got a call that somebody was dying of a heart attack. We knocked on the door, and a little old man opened the door for us. And as we looked in, there was another little old man lying down on his stomach, on his face. It was the guy who opened the door to let us in. It gives me the opportunity to talk to somebody directly about social issues, about entertaining issues. So you're telling me your husband came home late one night, sweaty and nervous, told you he was abducted by aliens, and then he told you that they took his wedding ring? People identify with that individual, with that host, and I hope I've been able to do that with my audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for your host of today's Future of Humanity panel. He's a 3-time Emmy Award winner, Mr. George Norrie.
Hello! I hope I can live up to that introduction. Wow! That was pretty long though, Tom. We're out of time. Thanks for being here.